We're going to look at combining like terms in this video. So, combining like terms, we have, when you look at terms, first of all, we have to figure out what a term is. And a term is anything in an equation or an expression that is separated by a plus or a minus sign. So this is a term, 2x, plus 3x is a term, plus 5 is a term, and plus 7 is a term. And when you're combining like terms, you have to figure out what are like terms and what are unlike terms. Like terms are things that can be combined together. They basically have the same variable attached to them. Since these have no variable attached to them, then they can be combined. They're like terms because they have the same variable. They don't have any. In these, they both have an x. And because those both have just one x, they can be combined as well. Once you recognize what can be combined, my personal technique is to make a box around one type of term. There's 2x, and then I can combine that with my positive 3x. I always include the sign that's in front of the term because that goes with it. And then then those are both the same, so I box out all the x's, and then I circle the non-x's, and those can go together. So it just kind of visually helps me to make sure I've included all the terms, and I know these go together and then these go together. So I look here, I've got 2x's and I've got 3x's. Together that makes 5x's. And I have 5 plus 7, and that's 12. So that's combined like terms. I just took these 4 terms and I combined them into 2 terms. I can't do anything more here because this has an x and this doesn't, so they are not like terms. I cannot combine them together. And I don't know what x is, so I can't get down to a single number. So that's it. So I'm just going to make these go in a little bit harder each time. So in the last question, let's look at it again briefly. I kept the x's together and I kept the whole numbers together to make it simpler because it's easier to see right next to each other that they're there. In this example, I just rearranged everything. Well, here's an x. I've got my x's. And then this one here is not an x. See, there's no x attached to it. There's one with an x attached to it, so I can box that. Remember, I want to include that sign. That sign is important. And then this does not have an x. So let's see, the ones without x's, I'll circle those again. Circle that. Combine my x's. I have 3 x's and I have negative 6 x's. 3 minus 6 is a negative 3. So I have negative 3 x's, and I've got 4 and 3, so that's a positive 7. And again, that's finished. Combined like terms, I can't do anything else with those. They do keep getting more complicated. In this case, I have more than 2 different terms that I'm going to end up with. I have a y. Put my box around my y. I have an x. Oh, that's not a y, so I can't go with my y's. That's separate. I have a whole number. Uh-oh. I can just underline that one. And I have another y. I boxed out my y over here, so I want to box out the y on this side. And then here's a whole number. Underline that as well. So we'll start off with our y's. 4y and 7y. That makes 11 y's. 2 x's. And there's nothing else to combine it with, so I'm just going to leave it as plus 2x. There's nothing to do with it. Negative 6 and plus 4, it's going to give me a negative 2. And then that's my completed expression now. It's as far as I can go. I can't combine y's with x's because they're different things, and I can't combine something without an x on it. That's as far as I can go with that one. Now, an area that a lot of people get confused with is when you have x squared. People think, well, this is x squared. Then I can still combine it because they're both x's here, but they're not. The thing to remember is that x is a length. If I have some number like 5, it's a length, some long. X squared means it's 5 by 5. It's actually a square. It's literally a box, and so much different value than this is. So we cannot combine those together, even though they both have x's. This is 3 squares with a side length of x, and this is 2 lines with a length of x. So we can't put those together. All right, I'll box out x squareds. Now can go through. No. Oh, there's another x squared. Don't forget your sign. Gotta leave that in there. Any other x squareds? Oh, we got one here on the end. Okay, come back to the beginning. Circle my x's. Okay, and then I'm just left with one whole number. And you could underline it, sure. It's the other way I've seen people do it is make a triangle with it. So you can do any shape as long as it's easy to recognize the difference. I think the triangle, especially I'm sloppy with my triangles, so I think they get a little confusing. But alright, so I have negative 3x squared, negative 6x squared, and positive 10x squared. Well, these two negatives are going to make negative 9. This is a plus 10, so I'm left with 1x squared. Seemed really complicated and ended up fairly simple. 2 x's and negative 3 x's. Oh, down to negative x. And then I have plus 1. So that whole thing, even though it looked really ugly to start, it simplified down nicely into this nice little quadratic expression here. And that is combining like terms.